My name is Evelyn Moore. I'm 65 years old, a retired English teacher, and a widow. My husband Charles passed away 3 years ago after a long battle with cancer. He was the love of my life, and since his passing I've done my best to stay strong for myself and for my family. I used to believe that weddings were sacred, those rare occasions when everyone gathers to celebrate love, commitment, and legacy. That's what I thought I was walking into when I arrived at my granddaughter Jernelkina's wedding. I had helped pay for everything. The venue, the catering, the floral arrangements, even the string quartet she wanted for the ceremony. It brought me joy to give her the day she'd always dreamed of. But that joy shattered the moment I reached the check-in table at the Westcott Grand Hotel. A young woman with a clipboard greeted me cheerfully. "Name, please." "Evelyn Moore," I answered, smiling. She flipped through a stack of alphabetized cards and plucked one out. "Here you are," she said, handing it to me. I looked down, expecting to see Evelyn Moore, grandmother of the bride. Instead, in glossy, gold-trimmed calligraphy, it read, "The old lady who's paying for everything. I froze. The woman must have seen the color drain from my face because she leaned forward, concerned. "Was something wrong, ma'am?" I forced a smile. "I think there's been a mix-up." She glanced at the card again, her eyebrows lifting in alarm. "Oh no, let me check if there's another one." "It's all right," I said quickly. "I'll speak with my family." I pinned the name tag to my pale blue dress, the one Charles always said made me look graceful, and walked into the ballroom, my heart sinking. That moment didn't just bruise my pride. It rewrote everything I thought I knew about how my family saw me. And as I watched them laugh, pose for photos, and clink champagne glasses, one thought echoed in my mind louder than the music. I was no longer Evelyn, the mother, the grandmother, the woman who had supported them all for years. I was just the bank. After the wedding reception, I returned home and sat quietly in my living room. My name tag was still pinned to my dress. I hadn't had the strength to take it off. The words echoed louder in my mind the longer I stared at them, "The old lady who's paying for everything." It wasn't the first time I'd felt used, but it was the first time I truly saw it. It started 6 months after Charles passed away. Brent, my only son, and his wife Nicole invited me to dinner. They cooked a lovely meal, poured my favorite wine, and spent the evening reminiscing about Charles, how much they missed him, how proud he would have been of Jennifer. Then, over dessert, Brent refilled my glass and said, "Mom, Nicole and I have been thinking about remodeling the kitchen. Nothing extravagant, just new counters, better appliances." "That sounds lovely," I replied, smiling. He hesitated, then added, "We were wondering if you might be able to help out." Nicole chimed in, "With college tuition for the kids and bills, we're a little tight right now." I said yes, of course I did. That night, I wrote them a check for $30,000. It didn't feel like a favor. It felt like family, like what Charles would have wanted me to do. But that was just the beginning. The kitchen remodel turned into a full home renovation. Then it was Jennifer's tuition. Then Michael's car. Family vacations to the coast. Weekend getaways to Aspen. Birthday parties that looked like luxury galas. And always the same script. "You're so generous, Mom. Dad would be proud of you. We just need a little help this month." Last week, I opened a box of old bank statements I had tucked away in the hallway closet. Sitting on the floor, I began tallying up the totals, check by check, withdrawal by withdrawal, line by line. Over the past 3 years, I had given Brent and Nicole nearly $250,000. And for what? A name tag at a wedding that reduced me to a punchline. That night, I realized something had shifted in our family long ago, slowly, quietly, like a crack in the foundation you don't notice until the house begins to lean. They didn't respect me. They used me. And I had let them. The morning after the wedding, I was still in my bathrobe, sitting at the kitchen table with that awful name tag in front of me, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the window and saw a familiar figure, tall, well-dressed, holding a leather folder under one arm. "Mrs. Moore?" he called gently. "It's Daniel Price." Daniel had been Charles's attorney for over 20 years. He'd helped us with our will, estate planning, and handled all of Charles's affairs when he passed. Always respectful, always kind. I opened the door. "Forgive me for dropping by unannounced," he said, stepping inside. "But after yesterday, I felt it was time." He glanced at the name tag on the kitchen table but didn't mention it. Instead, he pulled out an envelope and held it in both hands as if it were something fragile. "Charles left this with me," he said softly. "It's a clause he added to his will shortly before he died. He asked me not to share it unless I felt you needed it." My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. The language was formal, but the message was clear. Any direct descendant who publicly humiliated or manipulated me, Evelyn Moore, would forfeit their share of Charles's estate. It was signed and notarized. My mouth went dry. "He called it a codicil," Daniel said, "a legal addendum enforceable by the executor, which is me. Charles wanted your family to treat you with respect because they loved you, not because they feared consequences. But he also wanted to protect you if they didn't." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the document, feeling something shift inside me, a strange mix of heartbreak and relief. Charles had seen it. Maybe not the name tag, or the jokes, or the cold entitlement, but he'd sensed what was coming, and he tried to shield me from it, even after he was gone. Daniel reached across the table and placed a hand over mine. "What do you want to do?" he asked. I folded the paper carefully and handed it back. "Nothing," I said quietly. "Not yet." Because a part of me still needed to know, was that name tag a mistake? A one-time lapse in judgment? Or was it just the beginning of something far worse? I needed to see who they really were. So I watched. And I waited. 3 days after the wedding, Brent and Nicole hosted a post-wedding brunch at their country club. I almost didn't go, but something told me I needed to. I needed to know if the name tag was a fluke or a symptom. I arrived in a simple cream pantsuit, one Charles had always said made me look like royalty. As I stepped into the dining room, I spotted Jennifer and her new husband Mark, their hands clasped. Michael was there too, chatting quietly with a group of friends. Everyone looked relaxed, celebratory, untouched by what had happened just days earlier. "Mom, over here," Brent called from the head table. So Nicole greeted me with an air kiss and a quick compliment about my outfit. "You look nice," she said, eyes scanning my neckline for the pearls I hadn't worn. They'd seated me beside Mark's parents, people I barely knew, while Brent and Nicole were at the center of the action. It was subtle but intentional. Halfway through brunch, Nicole stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. "We just want to thank everyone for making Jennifer and Mark's day so special," she said, beaming. "And of course, a very special thank you to Grandma Evelyn, whose generosity made it all possible." All eyes turned toward me. I nodded politely. Nicole continued, her voice rising with excitement. "And we're thrilled to announce that Grandma will also be gifting the happy couple a 2-week honeymoon in Bali." There was light applause. My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. I had made no such promise. Brent leaned toward me and whispered, "Just go with it, Mom. We already told them." I set my cup down. "This is the first I'm hearing of it," I said clearly, letting my words hang in the sudden silence. Jennifer blinked, confused. Mark stared at his plate. Nicole laughed awkwardly. "Well, you said you'd think about it." "I did," I replied. "And I still am." Brent's smile vanished. "Don't make a scene, Mom." My voice stayed calm but firm. "I don't recall agreeing to pay for an international honeymoon. I believe Mark's parents were covering that." Mark's father cleared his throat, mumbling something about financial setbacks. "These things happen," I said kindly, "but it's inappropriate to publicly offer someone else's money." Nicole's expression twisted. "Well, you're not exactly broke." Something in her tone, the assumption, the entitlement, cut deep. "My financial choices are not for public discussion," I said. Brent grabbed my arm. "You're embarrassing us." I pulled my arm away. "No, Brent, you embarrassed yourselves." And for the first time in years, I stood up for myself and walked out of that room with my head held high. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, alone again. But this time, something was different. There was no crying, no spiral of guilt, only silence and clarity. I reached for the old box in the hallway closet, the one stuffed with bank statements and receipts. One by one, I began sorting the records of every check I had written. Furniture, tuition, vacation homes, even that ridiculous chocolate fountain Brent insisted on for Jennifer's sweet 16. And all this time, I had let them shape the narrative that I was just helping, that I was lucky to be needed. A knock at the door interrupted me. It was Michael. He stood on the porch with a worried expression, hands in his jacket pockets. "Hey, Grandma, can I come in?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside. He followed me into the kitchen, sat down, and looked at the documents spread out on the table. "I wanted to check on you," he said quietly, "and to say, I'm sorry, about the wedding, about the name tag, about everything." I looked at him carefully. "You noticed?" He nodded. "A lot of people did. I should have said something." "You're not responsible for your parents," I said gently. "But thank you." He hesitated. "Last week, I overheard Mom and Dad talking about your house." I felt a chill run through me. "They said it was time for you to move into one of those senior communities. That this place is too much for you. That selling now could really help everyone." He trailed off, not needing to say more. I poured 2 cups of tea, my hand steady. For the first time since Charles died, I felt grounded. "I'm okay, Michael," I said. "Really. I think I'm finally seeing things clearly." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "It means it's time for some changes around here." We sipped tea in silence, and I studied his face, kind, thoughtful, and maybe a little worried. I wondered if he truly was different. If he could break the cycle. Because I was done being quiet. And I was done being used. My 66th birthday arrived quietly, and I had planned to let it pass with little fanfare. But Michael had other ideas. "Grandma," he said a week before, "I want to host a dinner. At your house, just the family. It's time they remembered whose home this is." Something in his tone, firm, protective, reminded me of Charles, so I agreed. That morning, I worked in my garden, pruning roses and tending to the flower beds I had neglected for years, while pouring myself into Brent and Nicole's needs. Now, like me, the garden was growing again quietly, stubbornly. By evening, the house was spotless. The table was set. I wore a bold red dress I never would have chosen before. Red had always felt too loud, but now, it felt just right. Guests arrived at 5 sharp. Brent and Nicole showed up first, smiles tight and practiced. "Happy birthday, Mom," Brent said, handing me a bouquet of supermarket flowers. "You look different," Nicole added, eyes narrowing at my dress, my makeup, my posture. "Thank you," I said simply, letting them in. Jennifer and Mark followed, then a few of Charles's old friends, including Daniel Price. And we ate dinner with polite conversation and clinking glasses, but I felt it, the tension, the pause before the storm. It came during dessert. Brent cleared his throat and stood. "Before we finish, Nicole and I have something we'd like to address with the family." I set down my cake fork. "We've become concerned," he continued, "about Mom's financial decisions. She's become isolated. She's giving away money irresponsibly, refusing support. It's time we consider assigning power of attorney for her protection." The room fell silent. Daniel Price set down his coffee. "That's a serious step, Brent. Do you have evidence of diminished capacity?" "She's funding a bookstore," Brent snapped. "In the digital age, she's refusing to downsize. She's ignoring common sense." I stood. "I am not irrational," I said, "or confused, or incapable. I'm simply done being controlled." "Mom, be reasonable." "I've been reasonable for years. I funded your remodels, your vacations, your daughter's wedding. I've let you treat me like a bank account instead of your mother. But that ends today." Brent's face flushed. "So you're just cutting us off?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm reclaiming what was always mine, my voice." Then Daniel cleared his throat. "Actually," he said, reaching into his briefcase, "Charles anticipated this very situation." He pulled out the envelope, the same one he had shown me weeks ago. In a legal clause added to his will, any descendant who publicly humiliates or manipulates Evelyn forfeits their inheritance. Gasps filled the room. Jennifer paled. Mark looked stunned. Nicole choked on her wine. "That's not fair." Daniel turned to me. "Evelyn, do you wish to enforce it?" I looked at Brent, at Nicole, at Jennifer, then finally at Michael, who nodded in quiet support. "Yes," I said, "I do." Brent dropped into his chair, stunned. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I replied. Because this time I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was ending the cycle once and for all. A year has passed since that birthday dinner, since I stood up and drew a line between love and loyalty and the quiet manipulation I had mistaken for care. So much has changed since then. Michael's bookstore, Chapter 1, opened downtown last spring. It's nestled inside a beautifully restored Victorian house with tall windows and worn wooden floors. The kind of place that invites you to stay. A place that feels like home. On the walls hang shelves of thoughtfully chosen books. In one corner, there's a children's section with beanbags and shelves, low enough for tiny fingers. A mural I painted myself wraps across one wall trees, hidden animals, and little fairy homes tucked between mushrooms. Michael hired his girlfriend Emma to manage the coffee counter, which now serves locally roasted blends and homemade scones. Twice a week, I read to the children from classic picture books. It's something I never imagined myself doing, but it fills a part of me I didn't know had gone quiet. The upstairs apartment, once dusty and forgotten, now hosts a rotating writer-in-residence program that Michael created using a portion of his inheritance. He says it's his way of giving voice to stories that matter. And mine has only just begun. I still live in my own home, the one they wanted to downsize and sell. The roses bloom brighter now, the kitchen smells of baked bread again, and the air feels lighter without the weight of obligation pressing into every wall. Jennifer visits often. She brings her baby daughter, whom she named Charlotte after Charles. Sometimes she apologizes again for not speaking up, and each time I tell her the same thing: you're here now. That's what counts. Drent and Nicole. They moved to Florida after Daniel enforced the clause in the will. Their attempts to challenge it went nowhere. The silence that followed was loud and bitter: occasional Christmas cards, stilted messages through Jennifer. But honestly, the distance has been healing. Last summer, I took a trip to Italy with a senior tour group, 2 weeks exploring Florence, Venice, and Rome. It was the first time I'd used my passport since Charles passed. On the final evening, while watching the sunset over the Arno River, I met Frank, a retired architect from Boston, with kind eyes and a sense of humor dry enough to match mine. He calls me every Sunday now. Charles would have approved. So not just of Frank, but of all of it, of me finding peace in my own way, of investing in people who give, not just take, of saying no when it matters, and yes to things that once felt out of reach. I used to think family was about blood. Now I believe it's about presence, about who shows up, listens, learns, and respects. I look around Chapter 1, the bookstore, the baby gurgling in her stroller, the young writer upstairs finishing her manuscript, and I feel it in my bones. This is my legacy. Not the money, not the name, but the strength to say, enough.
And the heart to believe there's more ahead. If you've ever been taken for granted, if you've ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, or be thankful for the scraps they throw you, let this be your sign. You don't owe anyone your silence. You owe yourself peace. Like, share, comment if this spoke to you. Because sometimes the quietest revenge is simply becoming whole again.